Rebuilding the Las Vegas Raiders is astounding. Now, it's a lot of work. There's a lot of numbers. So we're not going to get into specific numbers. We'll kind of talk generally. But we're going to create a situation where we can sign really good football players, retain a lot of good ones, but go out and really spend efficiently. That's my goal. I don't want to spend money just because we have the money to spend. I want to rebuild this in the right way. With that being said, let's start with the players that the Raiders currently have. It's going to start with number 98, the face of the franchise, Maxx Crosby. You got to find a way to get an extension and potentially usher in more cap space. You can push money down the line, regardless of how you want to structure that. The fact of the matter is we're going to bring Maxx Crosby back into the building, and it starts there. We're setting a tone this offseason by taking care of the core piece of our foundation. Moving on from there, we're going to stay in the edge room, and we're going to go Malcolm Koonce and K'Lavon Chaisson. Now, what is that Malcolm Koonce number going to look like? People have projected it to be 20 plus million. I'm not giving Malcolm Koonce 20 million. I don't think he makes 20 million. Side note, a team to look out for is if Josh Sweat walks from the Philadelphia Eagles. I would not be surprised to see Philly pursue a guy like Malcolm Koonce, and Malcolm Koonce take that opportunity to be plugged in a defensive line like that, a really good football team, maybe a one-year deal, and really cash out on an opportunity. We won't go too deep into that. But I'm going to retain in this situation Malcolm Koonce and find a way to bring back K'Lavon Chaisson if you can get those two deals affordable. If you can only keep one, we're going to keep Malcolm Koonce. Now we move back up into the linebacker room. I know we can talk about Adam Butler, but I don't think he's priority. I feel like he's going to be a guy that you can retain if you can retain him. If the asking price is too much, you're just going to move on. So moving to the linebacker room, we're letting Divine Diablo walk. And for the right price tag, we're going to find a way to keep Robert Spillane. Spillane is interesting because I do think that Robert Spillane is replaceable. You guys see on the thumbnail, you follow me and Pharaoh, we're big on undrafted. That's the core identity of this podcast, are overlooked, undervalued people. That's Robert Spillane, and I have a heart for Robert Spillane, and I love what it is he can bring to this defense. His fight, his effort, his passion. There's things in football that just... they're tangible, and you can feel, and Robert Spillane embodies that. So for the right price, I'm bringing Robert Spillane back and keeping a core to this defense. However, if the asking price is around $10 million, I'm going to look for an upgrade. Robert Spillane is 29 years old. I do think you can find an option. I think Ernest Jones in free agency, if we don't bring Spillane back, is an option. Has history with the Seattle Seahawks. An athletic linebacker, downhill guy, played for the Rams, Seattle, had a brief stint with the Titans. It's a guy who's kind of been around a little bit, a bit of a character, but he's a good linebacker. He's a good football player. There's a few guys that you could bring in. If you wanted to pluck a talent away from the Kansas City Chiefs, you can go and target a guy like Nick Bolton. He's going to be expensive. But if you're wanting to upgrade that linebacker core and move on from a guy from Robert Spillane, you can target a guy like Nick Bolton. There's obviously going to be a Zach Bond in free agency. But in this situation, we're going to keep Robert Spillane and maybe attack a guy like an Ernest Jones who you can get relatively affordable. Moving into the secondary, now this is unique. Nate Hobbs is a guy who I think Pete Carroll's going to love. Big nickel, downhill, effective in the run game. Essentially another guy who can attack the edge like a linebacker and really be effective in run defense. And Nate Hobbs is a guy who I could see Pete Carroll wanting to retain. Again, it's got to be the right asking price. If you can get Nate Hobbs around that $8 to $9 million mark on maybe a 2-year deal, I think that makes a lot of sense. I think it makes a lot of sense for Nate to prove that he can stay healthy and just to show that you're willing to give him a pay raise because you value him. So around $8 million, $7, $8, $9 million for a Nate Hobbs on a 2-year deal, that seems fair to me. It's hard to find a big nickel who's a really good tackler and who can set an edge and a presence in your secondary, and I think Nate Hobbs does that. Moving on, I do think that Jack Jones is a trade candidate. Now we can get into speculations on what that might look like. I wouldn't really mind. And we'll get into the running backs a little bit later, but I really wouldn't mind Pete Carroll calling Seattle and seeing if Jack Jones and maybe one of those extra 6th, maybe a 5th, and see if you can work out a deal for Zach Charbonnet to bring him into the running back room. We'll kind of dabble into that here in a little bit, but I think Jack Jones could be a trade candidate, but it is also a guy that maybe Pete thinks like this guy's got a little bit of edge to him. Let's coach him up and just see what we have. Maybe Patrick Graham's goes and fights for him a little bit to keep him in that room. And you don't want to deplete yourself too thin because you don't want to allocate a ton of money into the secondary, because if you do let go of a guy like Jack Jones who's still on a rookie deal, I mean, you got to replace him. And who are you replacing him with? And that's another topic for another day. But Trayvon Merrick, safety. This is a guy who I loved coming out of TCU, and I really think he's starting to find his niche in the Raiders defense. I think Patrick Graham really values and covets and puts a lot of responsibility on his plate. And I think that there's something to be said to that. And I think with Patrick Graham coming back, a lot of these guys have the ability to be retained. And if it wasn't Patrick Graham, I don't know that a lot of these guys are coming back with the Raiders. You look back on the success that they've had the last 2 years, and there's not been a lot of success with the Raiders. So to make a huge case into why all of these guys should be brought back, you can, but when a new regime is taking over and a new mindset and a new mentality and a new direction, they might see things a bit differently and willing to shake things up a bit. So Trayvon Merrick coming back, I'm not going to give him $19-20 million a year. And at $15 million a year, it's even kind of pushing it because of the replacements that we can look to in the draft. But also, I mean, you look at guys like Blackman from the Indianapolis Colts. You look at Javon Holland. You look at some of these names that you could go out there and maybe spend a little bit less on and get a little bit of upside in ball production, right? And creating turnovers. Now, I do love that Trayvon Merrick is a pro's pro. He's really good in the nickel. He's really good in the box. And I love the uniqueness that you can do in that room. But there is one name that we're going to look at to add to the safety room that I think is going to make a huge difference. And we're going to visit the 49ers and pluck their free agent, Hufanga, a guy who Pete Carroll has gone against for years, thinks very highly of. And you're talking about an all-pro safety, a guy that Patrick Graham, you can get in the mix of getting down in the box, getting involved in the run game, but also playing a little bit of free safety, being a little bit of a ball hawk. And I think that's what Hufanga brings to the Raiders defense. If you went out to add him, is pairing along with a guy who's a smart player like Trayvon Merrick, you can go get a Hufanga and really make this thing unique and interesting. I think at the defensive back room, we talked about bringing back Nate Hobbs. I think a guy that you can look into, two guys that have a history with the current coaching staff for the Raiders, Paulson Adebo and DJ Reed. These are guys who have a history with the coaches that are currently on the staff, and they're free agents, and they have upside. DJ Reed is nasty. He's physical. He's going to come down much like Nate Hobbs. He's going to be aggressive in the run game. And I think that's what Pete Carroll wants. He wants an attitude, a tone-setting secondary. DJ Reed is all of that. Paulson Adebo is a young talent coming off of a leg injury that's pretty significant, but you can get him on an affordable deal with a ton of talent. You're talking about a Pro Bowl talent. And Paulson Adebo, you bring him in. We brought in the coaching staff from the New Orleans Saints as a defensive back coach into this defense, and I think you connect him, you make that connection with Paulson Adebo, and I think that you're adding a youthful 25, 26-year-old corner into a room that could really use it, and I think it would just be huge for the Raiders secondary. So currently, we've got Max, we've got Kuntz, we've got Christian Wilkins. If we can, we're going to bring back an Adam Butler, maybe go target a Poona Ford, a BJ Hill to really solidify that nose. And then you move into the linebacker, an Ernest Jones, a Robert Spillane, guys like that. We move into the secondary. We've got a DJ Reed or maybe a Paulson Adebo. We brought back Nate Hobbs. You're really competing with Jacorian Bennett. And if you can bring Trayvon Merrick back on an affordable deal, we have him back, and maybe you look on taking a flyer on a guy like Hufanga, who, regardless if you bring Trayvon Merrick back or not, he's going to be a guy that I target. I think he's going to be pretty pivotal for this secondary, is bringing attitude and a playmaker like that. So that's the defensive side of the football. I think for relatively low cost, bringing in Ernest Jones, DJ Reed, or Paulson Adebo, targeting a guy like Hufanga who's coming off of an injury himself, maybe get him on a relatively good deal, and re-signing some of our core guys. I think that you were able to spend money, but spend it effectively without going completely crazy. Now we're going to transition to the offensive side of the football. Let's start with the wide receiver. Let's start with the skill position unit, okay? Let's look at the wide receivers because this wide receiver room needs a makeover. I'm looking at guys like Tutu Atwell from the LA Rams, a guy who Chip Kelly could plug in, a speed guy, smaller frame guy, kind of reminds me of a Tez Johnson that's coming out in the draft. Just a smaller frame guy, but offers you the ability to take the top off of the defense. That Tutu Atwell can bring that for the Las Vegas Raiders. I'm also looking at a really underrated football player in Darius Slayton. Much like when we picked up Jakobi Meyers, this feels like the last guy that when Jakobi Meyers was a free agent, I made videos about why the Raiders should go and pursue him, and I think that that's paid off well for the Raiders, is that they went and got Jakobi Meyers. I think they've gotten more than what they've paid for. And a guy like Darius Slayton, I think you're getting something similar to that. I think you're getting a guy who's physical in the run game, who's asked to block, a little bit thinner, kind of like a Darnell Mooney, a little bit thinner, but man, is he explosive. He could be a nice complement to move in the slot, move outside. All these guys are interchangeable. You can move Jakobi in the slot, and you can move Darius Slayton to the Z. There's a lot of things that you could do to interchange these guys. So that's just a few names. There's, you could look at the Elijah Moores. You could look at guys like that. But really, there's also a trade candidate. If Pete Carroll did want to go trade for a guy like DK, we do have the cap space to do that. And maybe you have to give up a third and a fifth, something like that in a package to go get a DK in this exercise. Let's not do that, even though I do think it would be extremely unique to go out there in free agency, trade for DK, give him a contract. But also you have guys like, Jakobi Meyers and DK Metcalf who can be physical in the run game and really create that identity that Chip Kelly's looking for. I think that there's something there, and that's pretty unique, and it's pretty intriguing. But transitioning over into the offensive line, look, Trey Smith is obviously going to be everybody's target, but you weaken in a division rival and plucking him from the Kansas City Chiefs. But I do also want to I want to look at James Daniels from the Pittsburgh Steelers. I think he's a guy that you're not going to have to just completely break the bank for. Will Freeze, a guy from the Indianapolis Colts, another just good guard that I think that you could bring back. A guy like Jordan Meredith, I think that you should bring back if you're the Las Vegas Raiders. He's a guy who's homegrown, and I think he's just continuing to develop. He's not elite. He's not great, but he's a good guard, and I think you pair him into that room that has a Dylan Parham, who I'm not very high on. You bring him in to compete, but you bring in a guy like Will Freeze, James Daniels, one of those affordable but really good football players that's probably going to they're gonna bring you more value eventually. I'm also thinking about a guy like Mekhi Becton, $10 to $12 million contract to come in and play right guard, to be physical, nasty, tone setter, running the football. I think that's another really good option. Now moving over into the running backs, and we're gonna save the quarterbacks for last, so I hope you guys stay tuned for that conversation. The running backs, I'm really only looking at two in free agency, and I don't necessarily think that they go this way. But a guy like Jordan Mason from the San Francisco 49ers, who stepped in for Christian McCaffrey, I think that's a really good candidate. If you don't want to take two running backs, which I do want to take two and probably grab one or two in the undrafted market, I really am probably going to go two running backs in this draft. However, if you want to bring in a veteran and maybe focus on drafting one running back in the second or third, I think I'm going to target a guy like Jordan Mason, a guy who has history in that zone offense. He's got that blend with Kyle Shanahan, but he really played really well stepping in for Christian McCaffrey. He is a restricted free agent, so whatever it is you're going to offer Jordan Mason, the 49ers are going to have an opportunity to match that. But with Christian McCaffrey in the building and a draft like that we have coming out, I don't think that the 49ers are going to be willing to spend a ton of money retaining a guy like Jordan Mason. So if you want to bring in a veteran presence who could be a starter day one, I'm going to go target Jordan Mason. Another guy is Jaylen Warren. If you don't go the Jordan Mason route, you could go get Jaylen Warren, another restricted free agent, a guy who is the backup to Najee Harris. Physical runner. Just tough. Brings that attitude that I think Chip Kelly would want to bring in the running back room. Again, they're losing two running backs, so Pittsburgh is probably more likely going to want to retain Jaylen Warren, knowing that they're going to let Najee Harris walk. So it might be a harder time matching a contract with the Pittsburgh Steelers because I think that they are really high on a guy like Jaylen Warren. But that's the running back room. Me personally, I'm going to go into the draft, and that's going to be a completely separate video, and I'm going to target two running backs to bring into the Vegas, and that'll be interesting to talk about in another video. But So far, you guys were targeting a guy like a Darius Slayton, a Tutu Atwell, guys that you can bring in to add some speed and burst. And then we're going to target some guys, more physical route runners, gives you some more size in the draft. But really, I want to bring some athleticism and a core speed element that room is just desperately missing. So Tutu Atwell, Darius Slayton, just a few names to keep an eye out if you're a Raiders fan. And then the potential of maybe making a trade for a guy like, DK Metcalf or one of these characters out there that are looking for a new home. I think Pete Carroll would welcome that with open arms. So transitioning into the quarterback situation. Now, if we're just looking strictly based off of free agency, I'm looking for a true bridge. Now, I know that kind of goes against what Pete Carroll said. They're looking to win right away. So when you're looking at a situation of trying to win right away, I'm thinking a trade. I'm thinking a trade's going to happen. Now, the trade that I would probably be most excited about, just based off of we haven't had a quarterback like this in a while, would be your Matthew Staffords of the world. Now, you're going to have to pay him. You're going to have to give up draft compensation. I'm not too big on that. Now, I think people are leaning a little bit rich when it comes to the value of that, because I think teams know, and they're going to tell the Rams, like, hey, we have to pay Matthew Stafford as well as give you draft capital. So I don't necessarily know at 37 years old they're going to get the type of ransom that you might think that they're going to get. So if that is an option, I'm probably going to go do that, and that puts this Raiders rebuild quick. So let's say based off of this, that doesn't happen. Let's stick strictly to free agents. But I will give that side conversation of, hey, Matthew Stafford's an option. Hey, Geno Smith might be an option, even though it seems like Seattle wants to retain him. Is that a route that you'd want to go? I wouldn't mind Geno Smith, but free agency, you're looking at the Sam Darnolds. And I think Pete Carroll would pair okay with a Sam Darnold. I don't want Sam Darnold because that means you're pairing him. You're signing Sam Darnold to a 3-year deal, and you're probably giving him $40 million a year. With the amount of holes that's on this Raiders roster, I don't think that's wise. And Sam Darnold did it with Kevin O'Connell, and that was great. It's good to see that he was actually able to do it and revitalize his career and kind of show you what he can be. That's just a big risk. That's a huge risk, and you're allocating a ton of money to a situation like that. So Sam Darnold, for me, I'm probably going to be out on. It would not surprise me to see the Raiders go and do it, though. Just because if you can get 35 touchdowns, if you can create a scheme around a guy like Darnold and generate somewhat the same success that he just had, I get the direction that the Raiders are going because they want to win right now. Me personally, the direction that I would go, because though Pete Carroll says he wants to win right now, I don't want to take the foolish road here. I think you still got to do things the right way. I think you bring in a solid bridge guy, a guy like Marcus Mariota. If you guys haven't caught my video, a guy like Kyle Trask, who's still young and just needs an opportunity. But a guy like Marcus Mariota, pairing him with Chip Kelly, familiarity there. A guy who can be athletic, move out of the pocket, make all the throws, a good leader, well-respected, has had a history with the Raiders, has some familiarity with that building, that organization. I think that makes a lot of sense, and I don't think you have to completely break the bank there. You bring in a guy like Marcus, and what a mentor he's been to Jaden Daniels, and I think that you can do a situation like that, like giving a Shedeur Sanders or a Jackson Dart or a Will Howard, if you decide to go a route like that in the draft. I think Marcus Mariota is really good for that kind of situation, and I think that you can hand the keys to a rookie, but have a ton of weapons around him, really build around Brock Bowers. He's really the focal point, which is why you don't have to go crazy bringing in a true number one wide receiver. I think you have your true number one talent in Brock Bowers. Jakobi Meyers, you got to remember, they have two 1,000-yard options. Jakobi Meyers put up over 1,000 yards. Brock Bowers put up over 1,000 yards. Like, are you really... You could go add another 1,000-yard receiver in this offense, and you can make it really exciting. Or you could take it directions in the draft, a Matthew Golden. You can go get a Jalen Royals. You can go get a Tez Johnson. You can go get a Theo Weiss out of Missouri. I mean, there's a lot of options that you go. A Mika Buka from Ohio State would be phenomenal in this offense. Another guy to bring in and just be a solid run, has the ability to run block as well as be everything that you want in a receiver, has familiarity with Chip Kelly. I mean, those are the routes that I'm looking. Those are the big bodies, the Higgins of the world, those big body guys. You can target that in the draft. So I don't know, man. It's exciting, right? So, obviously, on offense for this experiment, we went the Marcus Mariota, the Kyle Trask route, and we're going to draft a quarterback. Offensive line, we went Will Freeze, we went James Daniels. Trey Smith is currently an option there, but are you going to pay him $20 million? I would kind of hesitate. I don't not like spending big at the guard market, but just let's spend wisely in the situation. We also went and targeted a Darius Slayton, maybe a Tutu Atwell, some guys like this that add speed to the room, to pair alongside Trey Tucker, Jacoby Myers, and Brock Bowers. So really, you guys, I think that we really did a really good job at targeting and bringing names to the table that are pretty cost affordable, but can also help turn this thing around quickly. And then we also gave you guys some trade candidates at the quarterback position, which is ultimately the route I think that they go. So yeah, keep an eye on the Matthew Staffords, the Geno Smiths, maybe even a Kyler Murray. That I don't necessarily see happening, but I mean, I think the Raiders are going to be really aggressive, so you can't be surprised at anything that they do. But I don't want to extend this much longer. Raider Nation, let me know of a few guys that you're keeping an eye on down in the comments section below. Again, just a quick summary: Darius Slayton, Tutu Atwell, potential Jordan Mason, Marcus Mariota. We grabbed a Poona Ford on the defensive line. We re-signed a few core of our guys. We went out and got a Ernest Jones. We attacked a DJ Reed and a Paulson Adebo potentially. We attacked Hufanga, and we tried to get back Merrick. So we did a lot of really good things that really could accelerate this kind of Raiders rebuild and really take a huge step in the right direction moving into 2026 offseason. So Raider Nation, let me know what you guys thought down in the comment section below. If you guys haven't yet and you guys have stuck around, subscribe to the channel. I'm Raider Ray. Smash this video with a like button.